Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. Today we're going to take a look at a potpourri of issues ranging from human trafficking to poverty to just a variety of issues that are of interest to all of us. My guest today is someone who's very knowledgeable of just an immense number of issues. My guest today is Nancy Prager-Kamel. Ms. Kamel is co-founder and CEO of the Strategic Expansion Solutions. Also, she is the chair of the board of the Association of Foreign Correspondents-USA. In 2009, she was appointed as a corporate ambassador for the U.S. Department of State, and in 2010, she was appointed as the U.S. National Commissioner for UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. Nancy Prager-Kamel, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Bill, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you and to speak to the public on issues that are very important, certainly to me, but I think worldwide.
They certainly are, and we greatly appreciate you being with us today. Let's just start off right at the beginning. You're the CEO of Strategic Expansion Solutions. What exactly, briefly, is that?
It's a company that focuses on corporate and business solutions at the highest level. So we originally, I think we were the first, but hard to say, to use the word corporate ambassador. We represent countries with high-level initiatives that possibly for political reasons or others, they have not been able to satisfy for themselves. For instance, there was a large country that had a promise of a huge sum of money from the IMF, but they were not compliant with the conditions. And they wanted to have a meeting with the president of their region, which was not Mrs. Lagarde, but they couldn't get it. And their staff couldn't get it, their president couldn't get it, and they came to us. And overnight, we had to make this meeting possible. That being said, they didn't get their money, but they did get to have an extension. And so often we can't work magic, but we can facilitate high-level meetings. And
so you're somewhat of a mediator, a go-between. You bring all the interested parties together to focus on this, and it's up to them to work it out. But you've done your part to help them to get together. Now, our viewers can go to your website at www.strategic-expansion.com to get more information on what your company is about.
Exactly.
And we've got a whole series of websites here because you're so active. One thing before we get to the other activities you have underway, you define yourself as a serial humanitarian. What is a serial humanitarian?
I wish I could say I came up with that idea. It was an article written about me in a magazine, and that was the way they described it. So it could mean a couple of things. It could mean that I don't focus on something, or it could mean that I just have a lot of interest. I find that one need spawns another. And so what would become serial was that I'd be aware of a problem and I would look for creative ways to resolve it. My original training and background was as a painter. And so, you know, you think creatively and think out of the box. And even when I was the head of an investment bank, I would always try to find people to work for me that had either music or art, some form of artistic expression, because I thought they are more eager and capable of being creative in resolutions. And so, as I said, it was written about me, but it was, I think, referring to the fact that there were so many different approaches. For instance, when Channel 13 was starting PBS and they needed money, they asked me—
That's in New York City.
New York City, yes. And we created a speakers bureau. I was 26 years old, I think, but I like people, and fortunately, some people like me. And so it's just been very easy when you have an enthusiasm and a passion to get people to get involved. And so if I could say that would be probably the single explanation.
It certainly would. It certainly would, yes. Now, you're also the chair, as if you need something else to do. You have so many activities underway with the Association of Foreign Correspondents-USA. First off, what is that group, and what is your role as chair?
All right. We actually represent foreign journalists who are living in this country, reporting on the activities in this country to their audience overseas. on all issues and all forms of journalism. So it's not just print, it can be media, it can be the internet. There are organizations like ONCA that are associations of journalists.
The United Nations Correspondents-USA. Association.
And they do a splendid job. But this is just a little more multifaceted. We run programs for them. We do high-level panels so that the information is available to them at the highest level from the very people that are significantly involved in the subjects. We have one on opioid coming up, and then we're doing one on the environment shortly after that, on technology. And we offer our members a chance to really have high-level exposure. And then we do the other major activity, which is scholarships. And so we give scholarships to foreign students studying in the U.S., studying journalism, or an expansion of their journalistic interest. They could be studying finance because they work for a journal that, like Wall Street Journal, that has financial components to it. And our scholarships have been to foreign students for a modest amount of money, but it offers mentoring and opportunity for them to really be exposed and participate at a high level.
And our viewers can go to your website at www.foreigncorrespondents.org to get more information. You're talking about journalists, and this is really becoming a major issue, especially as we see journalism under attack in many areas of the world. We see it in countries like Hungary, Turkey, the United States, Philippines, just on across the board. How serious is this problem, and do you do workshops on this, or do you have seminars, do you talk about it, brainstorm on it, or all of the above?
Great question. I tell you something funny. When I first got involved with journalism, it was about 26 years ago, and we spent a lot of time dealing with the deans of the big journalistic schools. And I remember having lunch with the dean of Columbia's journalism school, and he was telling me for the first time they were starting a program teaching the journalist how to defend themselves, most particularly when they go into a war zone. And I thought that's very interesting. Now you fast forward 26 years later, and you're actually talking about protecting themselves in all conditions and under all circumstances. They are an endangered species, and certain countries, many countries today, have taken a very aggressive form and tremendous abuse against journalists. Adnan Khashoggi is a perfect example.
With Saudi Arabia.
That's right. And happens, my husband's Egyptian and connected to the family. So, I mean, we knew what happened the day after he was missing. It didn't come to the papers for a long time, and then, of course, it was denied. But this would be unheard of 20 years ago. You know, it's an exploited profession, and you have to be very aware and very brave to enter into it.
You certainly do, and the rules of the game are changing simply because there's so many people who want to undermine journalists. And not all journalists get it right. They'll be the first to tell you that, but at least the majority of them try to do it, and sometimes they get it wrong. But now there's just a concerted effort to attack journalists. If something comes out that you don't like what the person wrote, or it offends you some way or the other, then you come back and undermine the person, do a character assassination on it, perhaps threaten the person, but it's a totally different ballgame today, and it's much more dangerous.
Completely. And the interesting thing, as you said, is that the whole playing field has changed, and so what we consider a profession, other people feel is a challenge to their principles or to their actions. And you know, there has been monumental attempts to silence. We exist now in a 24-hour news cycle, and that's different. And because of that, I think it has given a different momentum to the task of journalism.
Now, you were also, changing topics to something a little lighter, you were also appointed as National Commissioner for UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, which was one of the UN's key specialized agencies, headquartered in Paris, France. What was your position there, and what one or two issues did you look at?
Well, they select a number of commissioners to serve a 4-year term, I believe 3 or 4 years. I served a few terms. And what they want is, to their credit, I should say, what they are is an amalgamation of different issues. So it's not singular and it's not monofocused. And their issues, as you said, are education, science, technology. And in every one of these key issues, they have programs, for instance, culture. They have a fabulous programs to support the culture of music, of art. One of the things that I did that I very much enjoyed doing was giving other people's money away. And Laura Bush had a foundation that was giving scholarships to children through UNESCO. So we would send a question or ask young people to respond and apply for the scholarship, and would then evaluate the strongest candidates and be able to award 3 or 4 young people an opportunity to go abroad for a month or 2 months to pursue their challenge as they had created for themselves. And it's a way of exponentially sharing cultures, knowledge, information. So it really, as I said, there are only a few agencies. UNICEF's an agency, UNESCO's an agency. I mean, being called an agency gives them certain conditions at the UN, as opposed to NGOs, et cetera, et cetera. For instance, the UN gets to pick who heads them, which is not the case in many of the other.
The U.S.
The UN picks.
Oh, the UN picks them.
Yeah,
Oh, I see.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
I see.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, I remember Laura Bush, and that's often been the case with many first ladies of the United States, have been actively involved. And of course, she was very involved in education. In fact, was she not an honorary ambassador for UNESCO or something like that? They gave her some title. I cannot exactly remember what it was, but it was an honorific position. And she went around the world and was talking about the great role that UNESCO is. Now, this brings to mind, too, how important these UN agencies are for
Absolutely.
all the countries, all 193 countries in the UN General Assembly. But as of now, the United States is not a member of UNESCO.
And it's a very sad condition because, as I think most people will agree, that if there are issues or problems among the countries, the best way to resolve them is to have people sit at the same table, not exclude them. And what happened in the case of the U.S. pulling out was they objected to the inclusion of Palestine. Palestine was voted in, and so the U.S. decided that they were no longer going to participate. And I think, in a way, whether you agree with the politics and not to enter into a heavy conversation about it, there still has to be a place at the table for every controversy if you want to find a resolution. If you want to find a resolution.
Right. You have to talk about the issues and focus on them and hopefully work them out.
Yeah.
Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, which is a privately funded, independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guest. We'd invite our viewers to go to our website at www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to view previous programs. Also, if you're involved with the PBS or a community access television station, or you just have a website, you like our shows and you want to share them, please feel free to do so. Global Connections Television is provided at no cost as a public service to help us better understand international issues and how they impact our lives. Today we're looking at a myriad of issues ranging from the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization to human trafficking to climate change. And my guest today is bringing us up to date on many of these issues. My guest is Ms. Nancy Prager-Kamel. Ms. Kamel is the co-founder and CEO of Strategic Expansion Solutions, as well as the chair of the board of the Association of Foreign Correspondents-USA. Nancy, we've been talking about a wide range of issues up to this point. The one that I wanted to mention, you alluded to it earlier, is corporate ambassador. That was also your position appointed by the U.S. State Department. What exactly does a corporate ambassador do?
Well, as that was defined, which was probably a decade after we used the term, but they were defining it as representatives that they felt could go to other countries, other places, other people, and represent the principles and best efforts of the U.S. So the 2 countries I went to were Egypt, and in that case they were looking to develop a civil society. because at that point we have so many NGOs, many countries don't have that as an organizational part of their society. And so in an effort to support that, we went there, gave them some training, how to form NGOs, how to expand them, what benefit they can have to the community and to the country. And the second country I went to, now others went to other countries, I went to Morocco, where they were trying to help amplify the capacity for entrepreneurs. And I believe the focus was on women. So we went there, myself and 2 other businesswomen, went in order to give them tools to understand how you start a business, how, in my case, I went to teach them about going for your first financing, the tools you want, how to write reports on your company, how to present your company, how to manage the money that you hopefully receive. So it was more of a learning process that we were trying to assist with.
We've talked about several issues here, and of course we think about them, they're all encompassed in the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 logical practical goals developed in 2015, I guess, to run from 2016 through 2030, the 15-year span, to eliminate poverty, to eliminate hunger, to combat climate change, to empower women, to provide quality education. These all sound like these are goals that you've been dealing with your whole life and bringing them into your programs.
Well, as I said, in my humble opinion, I'm limited in capacity, but what I do have an abundance of is appreciation of people. I like people, and fortunately some of them like me, and so it's open paths. So if I, for instance, was on the board of UNICEF, but I knew we needed money, it happened that I was a painter, and so myself and Nan Annan, who was the wife of Kofi Annan, obviously, and who's a painter also. Kofi was
7th Secretary General of the United Nations.
Exactly.
Right.
And so Nan and I did a painting exhibition. We charged the ambassadors $50 to come into the UN to see the painting exhibition, and then we sold the paintings. And in, overnight we raised $35,000 for UNICEF. The same thing happened when a friend who sat on the board of Young Presidents, they have a senior group where they've gone on to be CEOs, and they come to a country every year, and they wanted to have something different, so they could go to any restaurant they wanted. And rather than that, they asked me, would I do a dinner for some of them at my house? And I said, look, and they'd pay me, they said, and I said, well, look, I love having dinners, but I'm not going to get paid for having dinner at my house. But what if I could do 10 of these dinners, and you give that money to UNICEF instead? And so that's what we did. I asked my friends from different countries whether their embassy would host a dinner, and they did. And we collected a lot of money, and the money went to UNICEF. So it's kind of thinking out of the box, but it's all, it all is connected with people.
It certainly is, yes. And 2 of the focal points of this program are climate change and empowering women. And we've seen that, of course, the UN Sustainable Development Goals do encompass both of those categories and bring them in quite strongly. I'm curious, when we think about empowering women, we also have looked at what's going on with human trafficking. And it seems that the problem, either we know more about it today because it's reported better than it was 20 years ago, or there's a proliferation of it. Did you get involved in that in any way, or did you focus on human trafficking?
It is actually my main commitment at this point, to a point that I was working with a local young person on the issue. He became a lobbyist down in DC, and what we were able to do is to lobby for states to include education on trafficking in the schools, which they have none of, none, not the public schools, not the private schools. I have a number of grandchildren, and I understand the odious and disastrous effect when these children are abducted, and how quickly it happens, and how almost impossible it is to really protect them without their being aware of what's going on. And so I wanted to have placed in the school system, at least on the for a few years. I mean, I would have liked it to start earlier. So far, in about 7 states, we've gotten it to go on the agenda in the school, in the school program, but only for the upper grades. And so I'd like to see it go on now, number one, throughout the other states, but also obviously start younger. I've got a lovely little 10-year-old granddaughter, and she was coming out of school and somebody was walking around her. She had no idea. So I bought her, much to her chagrin, and I made her put it on her backpack. I bought her a bell, a loud buzzer. And I said, if anybody gets close to you and you are uncomfortable, press it. And so I think it's a sorry state that we have to do this with our children, but it is more abundant these days because it's business. May I just say one thing?
Please do, yes.
You have here one of the agencies is the UNODC Office on Drugs and Crime. Simone has made the statement, or maybe I heard it from someone else, but I know she believes in it. And she said trafficking is now the number 2 crime in the world, because she said there are 3. There's drugs, guns, and trafficking. And she said if you think about it, you can use a bullet once, you can use a drug once, but you can use a child again and again. And with that kind of hideous visual image, people should really pay more attention and make sure that their children, from a very young age, understand what it means when someone gets too close to them and what they should do about it.
And it certainly is a major problem, and of course the United Nations has been dealing with this for years. You mentioned the Office for Drugs and Crime. The International Labor Organization is focused on this. I'm sure the UN Children's Fund, UNICEF, has been dealing with it. High Commission for Refugees, just on across the board.
UNESCO also.
Exactly, UNESCO have been involved. Well, in the last 2 minutes we have, the toughest problem we're dealing with, number one problem affecting the whole world, is climate change, according to the scientists and many people who have been studying this issue. How do you fold this into what you've been doing?
You know, that's why I said serial humanitarian. It really is just like a puzzle. It all fits. The fact of the matter is, when a crop fails, when land becomes too arid and people have to leave, they become migrants, they become refugees, they become subject to unwanted human rights aggression and offenses, including trafficking, exploitation, etc. So it isn't as though the SDGs are, singular in their importance. They're horizontal. The environment affects the humanitarian, affects education, affects employment. It is very significant to understand that with the environment and the melting of the environment in, not graphically, but just in this world, as we know it now, the problems are amplified. And I will say that, in my opinion, it is the biggest problem, but I think that there are people working at solutions. I'm helping a company that has a water technology. It's the cleanest technology in the world. We can get it into Africa, for instance, and give 500 million people access to clean water. If there's a will, there is a way. They have a technology which I personally love. It's a DNA treated. It's a hybrid tree. In 5 years, that tree grows from a seedling to 60 feet. You cut it down. In 5 years, you cut it down, and it regrows itself. You don't have to replant it. And that it deals with the carbon emission. It absorbs higher than any other tree. It deals with creating jobs, creating opportunities, and affluence. It's a very, it is a very fiscally rewarding tree. And this company, it's called Global Environmental Technology Partners. They take technology out of the universities and they commercialize it. And this one came from Stanford. I mean, big universities.
And now we see the Amazon rainforest is burning. We will need these trees in the future. There's no doubt about it. And not just there, but in many areas, the rainforests are being devastated. We see the slash and burn taking place. People are trying to create farms there to grow cattle and soy and what have you, and it's really counterproductive. Excuse me, that area does not sustain itself very well and that type of thing, but these are the problems we're dealing with. But Nancy Kamel, I want to thank you so very much for
Thank
a
you
very
very much.
interesting and a very informative program.
Thank you, Bill. I enjoyed it very much.
My pleasure. I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us today on Global Connections Television.